let's begin. We are on 17b1, but in order to start, we're starting right in the middle of a sentence, so we need to go back just a little bit, okay? So the Gemara really brings the Braita of Rabbi Shimon. So take a look at that little pasuk on the side of the page in the Hebrew, okay? So we're on 17... A4. Yeah, we're going to fly through it, okay? One more time. So you see the pasuk on the side? The little pasuk is on the side. That's the origin source of the whole Braita. Lo tuchal le'echol b'sha'arecha ma'asar deganecha. You can't eat in b'sha'arecha, in your gates. Ma'asar deganecha, your ma'aser. V'tiroshecha v'yitzarecha, and of your grapes and of your olives. U'bechorot v'karecha, and the firstborn of your cattle. V'tzonecha, and your sheep. V'chol nedarecha asher tidor, and all of the nedarim, all of the oaths that you made. Asher tidor. V'nedvotecha, and the nedavot u'tirumot yedecha, and the tirumah of your hand. So it seems like it's telling you about a lot of these things that you can't eat them b'sha'arecha, you can't eat them in your gates, you have to eat them in Jerusalem. Okay? Now, it just seems like a little bit of a sentence that has a bit of a run-on. Rabbi Shimon says as follows. What is this pasuk coming to tell you with all of these different words? So he says, Detanya, we learn the Braita, utrumat yadecha ele bikurim. How special. We're learning, we're in the parasha of bikurim. The Gemara is talking about bikurim. We just did kitavo upstairs. Trumat yadecha, the gift of your hand, that refers to bikurim. Ma bazel lamden. What does this come and tell you? Im leochlan chutz lechoma. If it's coming to tell you can't eat bikurim outside of Yerushalayim, it can't be. Why? Because we have a kal vachomer. We know it from a kal vachomer. Kal vachomer means that if it's true about the light one, it's definitely true about the one that is more strict. So as an example, if I tell you that I could hit, 5 free throws in a row, if I told you, well, do you think that Michael Jordan could hit 5 free throws in a row? Michael Jordan is obviously a better basketball player than me. So if I could do that, obviously Michael could do that, right? That's a kal vachomer, okay? Now, so says the Gemara, and I'm going to stick with that example when we get to Rava at the end of the Braita, okay? So kal vachomer. So we know that tirumah is more strict than maaser. And maaser, okay, which you have to eat in Jerusalem, which even a non-Kohen is allowed to eat, is less strict than tirumah, which only a Kohen is allowed to eat. So if maaser you could only eat in Jerusalem, obviously tirumah you could only eat in Jerusalem. So the pasuk over here, when it tells you about tirumah, you can't eat it in your gate, it can't be coming to tell you that. Must be, it's coming to tell you something more. You get lashes for eating it outside of the wall. How much more so? Bikurim lo kol sheken. How much more so? Bikurim, not tirumah, bikurim. Gemara says, that's coming to tell you that if you eat bikurim before you make the statement that we spoke about today, the thank you statement of the history of the Jewish people getting to that point, that you get malkut if you ate from the bikurim before the person made the statement. The Gemara says, okay, what about unidvotecha, the offerings that you make, the oaths that you make, zot todah v'shilamim. That's referring to todah and shilamim. Todah is a korban, a thank you korban, and shilamim is a korban that everyone eats a piece of. Do you need it to tell me that you can't eat that only in Jerusalem, that you can't eat out of Jerusalem? We already know it from a kal vachomer, from maaser. So every one of the pieces in the Braita is going to do the same thing. If maaser, if you eat it outside of Jerusalem, you get lashes. How much more so things that are more strict? So you don't need to tell me about todah shilamim, right? Obviously, what is it coming to tell you? It's coming to tell you that you can't eat it if you have the korban, you slaughtered the korban, but you just didn't throw the blood yet. So therefore, if you ate from it at that point, you get lashes. Bechor is also more strict than maaser. You don't need to tell it to me. What's it coming to tell you? To someone who eats a bechor, afilu la'achar zirika, even after zirika, right? Even after zirika, right? Someone who's not supposed to eat from the bechor, but after zirika, okay? Then the Gemara says, but it could not be telling you that you can't eat before zirika because you have a kal vachomer from maaser about Jerusalem, and you have a kal vachomer about zirika from todah and shilamim. Okay, so what we're doing is we're going like this. Maaser, Then we went to Bikurim. Then we said, okay, so Bikurim is coming to tell you that you can't eat from it before the guy makes a statement. Okay, next. What is about Todad Shalamim? You can't be telling me that. So what is it telling me? It's telling me that you can't eat before you throw the blood. Okay. Now when it comes to the next korban, which is the korban of Bechor, okay? The Gemara says, well, it can't be telling me out of the walls. I know that already from Maser. It also can't be telling me that you can't eat from it before Zerika, because I know that from Kal Vachomer from Todan Shilamim, because Bechor is more strict than that. Do you understand? So we're working with more and more strict things, and therefore the chidush that you need to tell me, if you're going to put it in the pasuk, each time is a bigger chidush. So what is Bechor coming to tell you? That even after Zerika, no one else is allowed to eat from it. B'karacha v'tzonecha, i.e. not a kohen. Okay? B'koracha v'tzonecha, that's referring to chatat v'asham. That refers to a sin offering and a guilt offering. Says the Gemara, it can't be coming to tell you any of those things that we said before. Lefnei Zerika, kal v'chomer todah. Acha Zerika, okay, it's more chamor, it's more strict than Bechor. So what must it come to tell you? It must be coming to tell you, even after Zerika, but here, not only are you not allowed to eat it, you're only allowed to eat in Jerusalem, you have to eat it in the curtains in the Azara, in the courtyard of the temple. Okay. We didn't get to that yet. Okay, we're going to get there. Just a second. Nidarecha, what's nidarecha? Zu'olah. Nidarecha means that you made a neder, hare zu'olah. Olah is more strict because it's completely burned up on the Mizbeach. It's the highest form of korban. So it's the strictest one. So all the things that you just said about all those other things, I already know them from a Kal Vachomer. So what does it mention Olah for in this pasuk? It must be coming to tell you, not Zrika, not Chutz Lachoma, not Chutz Laklaim, that you have to eat it in the Azara, because I would know all of those things from here. Rather, what is it coming to tell you? Haloba Katuv. The pasuk is coming to tell you, 17b1, Leochel min ha'olah la'achar Zrika, afilu bifnim, if you ate from the after Zrika, after the throwing of the blood, and in the kilayim, and in the courtyard, you ate a piece of olah. Who's olah supposed to go to? Only is burnt up completely on the mizbeach. It's the only korban that nobody gets a piece of. Not the Israel, not even the kohen. Who eats from that korban? Only the mizbeach, only for Hashem. That's why it's called olah. Olah means it rises up. Okay? So therefore I learned that if you ate from that, you get malkut. Amar Rava, Rava said, holy cow. That was just the most brilliant piece of Torah we learned from Rabbi Shimon. Any woman that's giving birth should say, or should hope to have a child like Rabbi Shimon. And if she can't have a child like Rabbi Shimon, she shouldn't even bother giving birth. Even though Rava says, I have some questions, but that was chef's kiss. Okay. The Rava says, okay, what's his problem now with the teaching of Rabbi Shimon? Okay, everyone understands the teaching of Rabbi Shimon, like how we're going in rising levels, and how in every case I wouldn't need to tell you the more strict thing in order for you to know everything beneath it. Right? Like in the example, if I told you I could hit 5 free throws, for sure Michael Jordan could hit 5 free throws. If I told you I could hit 5 layups, Michael Jordan for sure can hit 5 layups. If I told you I could do 5 dunks, Michael Jordan can do 5 dunks, because he's stricter than me, he's better than me, okay? So all these cases, anything that you're going to tell me about any of these things is all also now in the level above that item. Okay, says Rava, "My chumra de bikurim maaser." In what way is bikurim more strict than maaser? You're telling me that bikurim to maaser is Michael Jordan to Shlomo Fari. Sheken isurim asurim zarim. I told you that bikurim is more strict than maaser because anyone could eat maaser so long as they eat it in Jerusalem. That kind of maaser. Maaser of Jerusalem is eaten by anyone just brought to Jerusalem. So bikurim is stricter because no one else aside for a kohen is allowed to eat from it. Adirabah. But on the other hand, maaser chamur. Maaser is more strict than bikurim. Sheken asur leonen. Because maaser, an onen, someone whose father or mother passed away, before they bury them, that's called the onen. While they're waiting for burial, until they're avel, they're in this quasi-state called onen. Onen's not allowed to do mitzvot. I don't know if you know that. Not allowed to put on tefillin, not allowed to pray, not allowed to make berachot. After someone's parent passes away, but before they bury them. So you're supposed to be completely overtaken by the obligation to respect and to bring a parent to the final resting place. So therefore, no, you're not allowed to do any mitzvot. Okay?
But that's the mitzvah.
And it's a mitzvah to not do the mitzvahs. Exactly. Sheken asur la'onen, onen's not allowed to eat it. So let me just explain what the Gemara did using my example of Michael Jordan. Yes, the Gemara, hold up, says Rava. It's not Michael Jordan versus Shlomo Farhi. It's Michael Jordan versus Steve Kerr. So if I told you Steve Kerr could hit 5 outside, 5 threes, do you know automatically that Michael Jordan can hit 5 threes? No. Steve Kerr was an expert outside shooter. That was his jam. So although Jordan is better than Kerr at dunking a basketball, I don't think Steve Kerr ever dunked a basketball in his life. Although he's better at doing a triple reverse axel, drive underneath 5 people taking him, right? But Kerr's thing was outside shooting. So although there's one level where Jordan's better than Kerr, there's also a level where Kerr is better than Jordan. So therefore, once I've shown you that Bikurim is stricter, you told me Bikurim is stricter than Maaser. You know why? Because Bikurim only a Kohen's allowed to eat, and Maaser, even Yisrael's allowed to eat. But I found something where Bikurim is actually stricter than, that Maaser is stricter than Bikurim. Rava's basically going to do exactly the same thing for each one of the levels. You told me Todan Shilamim, the korban of thank you, and the korban that everybody eats from, is stricter than Maaser. Why? Because Maaser doesn't have the blood that you put on the Mizbeach. It doesn't have that you burn a portion of the animal on the Mizbeach, like the fats. So these things have an element that's stricter than Maaser. Adraba, Maaser Chamur, Maaser has something stricter than them. Sheken Teunin Kesef Tzura. Because Maaser needs a special coin that's minted in order to be able to redeem it. Whereas these korbanot don't require the same minted coin, the kesef tzura, to redeem it. So take a look at Rashi, 4th wide line in Rashi. Lipidyono, dichtiv, because it says, v'tzarta kesef biyadecha, and you will take the minted coin in your hand. What does that come to tell you? Davar sheyesh alav tzura. It requires something that has a minted coin on it. What is a minted coin? If you have a look at a quarter, you have the head on the front, you have the eagle on the back, okay? So that's a minted coin. Imagine just a round circle of silver, which is by weight a coin, okay, because that's how they used to have coins, but it wasn't stamped. The halacha is, in a non-minted coin, you can't be podeh maaser. Maaser means I take 10% of my field. Now I want to bring this to Jerusalem. I have to take all of my produce to Jerusalem? No. I redeem it onto the value of a coin on money, and then I take that coin to Jerusalem, and now I go out to reserve cut Jerusalem branch. Okay? No problem. But you require a minted coin. That stringency is not present if a person needs to redeem a Todah and Ma'an Shilamim.
Did the minted coin represent a certain amount? Like did each stamp represent a certain amount? Is that why?
No, it was a chiyuv in the type of coin that it needed in order to do a pidyon. Okay, so you can't just do it with a similar value. Whereas by Todah and Shilamim, a person would be able to be podeh for just for the money, on money, as opposed to a minted coin. Okay? So therefore, I found you something that makes Maaser stricter than Todah and Shilamim. Umay chumrad de bechor mitodah. Sorry. Umay chumrad de bechor mitodah v'shlamim. You told me bechor is stricter than Todah and Shilamim, a firstborn offering, right? Sheken kedushato merechem. Why? Because the bechor is kadosh the minute it's born. The second the baby is born, it's already a korban. Set aside, the firstborn korban. Adraba, Todah Shilamim Chamurim, Todah and Shilamim have a stringency over Bechor, sheken teunim smicha, unesachim, utenufat chazev hashok. It requires the leaning on the head of the animal with to do smicha, to do the vidui. Unesachim, and you have to do the pouring of the on the mizbeach. Utenufat chazev hashok. You need to take the chest and the shok is the thigh. You need to take it and lift it up and do the lifting up of the Kohen, which he does with that korban. So you see, it has things in Todan Shilamim that Bechor doesn't have. So you automatically assume Bechor is stricter. So therefore, I could learn everything from the level beneath it. But actually, and therefore you came up with a new chidush. But I could also find something that the other one is stricter. And what does that do? It knocks out the whole Kal Vachomer. Okay? In what way is Chatat Asham stricter than Bechor of firstborn? That the Holy of Holies, because it's a Holy of Holies. Adrabah, Bechor Chamur. But Bechor is also stricter than Chatat and Asham, than the sin offering and a guilt offering. That the Kiddusha comes to a Bechor from the moment it's born. Chatat and Hasham, you need to designate it. So you see it has a higher level of Kedusha in a different way. What is the Chumrah, the stringency, the higher level of Olah, the highest Korban? From Chatat and Olah, Sheken Kalul, because it's burned entirely on the Mizbeach. Adrabah Chatat v'Hasham Chamiri. Chatat and Hasham are stricter. Sheken Mechapri, because they bring kapara for certain types of sins. Now this is a very difficult question, a difficult point to make. You know why it's a difficult point to make? Because Olah also brings kapara for things, right? Just not the same as Chatat and Asham. So the commentators explain that what it's telling you is specifically for the type of transgressions or averot, which are negative commandments. Okay, now Olah, right, it brings kapara. We know for mitzvot aseh, Olah brings kapara for certain mistakes that we made in terms of those things. But Olah is not, you did this, bring this korban. When you bring in Olah, it brings kapara for those things. But it's not that you have to bring it for kapara for this specific avon that you did. Okay, Shekem mechapri. Rava now is basically dismantled the whole piece of Rabbi Shimon. V'chulu chamiri me'olah. And all of the things beneath the thing that you put on the highest pedestal, i.e. Olah, the korban that you burn completely, are all mochamur. D'it bahu shte achilot. Because they have two different achilot. What does it mean, two different achilot? Right? That the Mizbeach takes one piece of the korban, okay, by all the other korbanot, and the other people in charge of eating, i.e. either the Kohanim or the Yisrael in the case of the Shelamim, they also eat another piece. So there's an element of Chumrah because when other people eat a piece, there's certain laws attached to how the other people have to eat the piece. So it's true, Olah has everything on the Mizbeach, but like Todah, Shelamim, they have certain laws associated with the fact that someone else needs to eat it. Now here's the funny part. What happens if a person does not eat from that korban? The korban is not valid. So although Olah is more strict because it excludes the Kohen's eating, it excludes the Israel's eating, this one has more laws associated with it. So it has a level of stringency. Yes, the part of the kapara of Chatat is, like the Gemara says, the Kohanim eat the korban and the Baalim and the owners get kapara. Could you imagine you eat a steak, a delicious prime rib, and Hada gets kapara because we did it the way it's supposed to be done? Yes?
Even though it fulfills Hashem's smell in the aroma, which is why it's burnt, right? Doesn't it fulfill Hashem?
It does.
In the aroma?
Sure.
That one is done.
Yeah,
Be fulfilled because the Kohen has to make it into need.
Correct. So the Torah gave a law that this korban needs the Kohen eats it. It's not optional eating. Part of the korban is that the Kohanim eat and the Baalim and the owners get their kapara. So that makes it stricter. Why? Because it has more laws. Okay? That's Rava. Ela mahdi. So the Gemara says, one second. Rava, you just tore apart every part of what Rabbi Shimon said. Now you're saying that any mother should pray to give birth to a child like Rabbi Shimon? You just disagreed with him on everything. The Gemara answers, yes, it's true that I argue on Rabbi Shimon because of what I hold. But according to Rabbi Shimon's own opinions, according to his own logic, what he said was absolute genius. And therefore, I'm saying that every mother should pray to have a child like that. Now, imagine that, you and I having a disagreement. You say something so smart, and I say, listen, it's true, but that's predicated on the idea that ABC. So I disagree with you on that. But you, who feel the way you feel about what you say, everything you said was genius. It doesn't take away from the brilliance of what you said according to your own opinion. Okay? Says the Gemara. Okay. One second. So according to this, now that you're telling me that Rabbi Shimon is telling you about all these cases, that you get lashes for everything, and you would have been able to understand that you get lashes if you eat it outside of Jerusalem from a kal vachomer, the Gemara says, but we already said this earlier. Could you give someone lashes because without it being said explicitly in the pasuk, right? Because you had a kal vachomer, even according to the opinion that says onshin min adin, that you could punish somebody on the basis of kal vachomer, of something that you learned out, not explicitly where it says in the pasuk, and mazhirin min adin, even if you could punish from a kal vachomer, you can't institute the law from a kal vachomer. You hear the difference? So in other words, let's say the Torah said you can't do X, and the Torah said you can't do Y. X is less strict, Y is more strict. So there's one opinion that says that you can't ever punish from a kal vachomer. It needs to say, if God wanted the guy to get Makkot, he should have said so in the Torah. And if he doesn't do Y, which is stricter, he gets Makkot. Just like it says, if he doesn't do X, he gets lashes. It has to say, if he doesn't do Y, he gets lashes. You can't say, if you get it for something smaller, of course you get it for something bigger. That's the opinion of En Onshim Min Adin. And the Gemara says, and even if Rabbi Shimon holds Onshim Min Adin, that you could take a punishment from a kal vachomer, what does he mean? He means it says X you can't do, and it says X you get lashes. Then it says Y you can't do. It doesn't tell you why you get lashes. Could I at least assume from a kal vachomer that if that one gets lashes, you get this one? That's onshim min adin. So even if there's an opinion that says that you could do that, no one holds that if no one ever told you in the Torah that you're not allowed to do it, that mazhirin min adin, that you could now establish that the avon itself is real from a kal vachomer. It's one thing if God told you don't do it, and then God told you something smaller not to do, and then God told you about the smaller thing that you get a punishment of lashes. It's one thing to understand that you could get lashes without the pasuk telling you so explicitly. But do you think you could even make up the law itself from a kal vachomer? The Gemara says, correct. That's true. Isura be'alma. Okay? What Rabbi Shimon is learning out is not that you get lashes from there. He's saying only that there's an isur, that you have it's asur, it's prohibited to be able to do it from a kal vachomer, but not that you be able to establish a lo ta'aseh, a negative commandment that would result in malkut. Correct. Rabbi Shimon would agree with that. So what was he telling you in the Braita? Rabbi Shimon was telling you in the Braita, you could see what's asur from the strict, lenient setup. The Gemara says, if that's the case, V'hamar Rava, didn't Rava say, Zar shachal min ha'olah lefnei zrika, chutz lachoma, if you have someone who is a zar, what does a zar mean? Zar means a stranger. We don't mean a stranger like someone who's a stranger danger. We mean someone who's zar is always the terminology we use when the person doing what we're talking about is not the one that was set to do it. So as an example, we say that a person who's a zar can't do the melachot in the Mishkan. So in other words, let's say I'm Israel, I'm a big rabbi, let's say. Imagine, I was a big rabbi with a big beard. I know all the laws code. I want to bring the korban in the Beit HaMikdash, but I'm Israel. Am I allowed? No. Very serious transgression to do that, okay? How about slaughtering the animal? Halakha is shchita kishera bizar. The slaughtering of the animal is kosher even by Israel. The Gemara says, how is that ever going to be relevant? The animal has to be in the courtyard, the inner courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash when you do the shechita. I'm a Yisrael, I'm not allowed to step into the courtyard. So how is there ever a case where Yisrael is going to slaughter the korban? The Gemara answers, when they bring the animal all the way to the edge of the azara, of the courtyard, the Yisrael is standing outside of the courtyard, but he does the shechita to the animal in the correct place where it's supposed to be. So that's called zar. Zar means a stranger. So I would be, for the melacha inside, I'm considered a stranger. So the Gemara says, zar sha'achal min ha'olah, a stranger, i.e. a person who's not a kohen. Sha'achal min ha'olah, who eats from the olah. Who's supposed to eat from the olah? No. Olah. Nobody. Right? So a non-kohen who eats from the olah, lifnei zirika, before they throw the blood, chutz lachoma, outside of the wall. So it's not only is no one supposed to eat from it, he's not even a kohen, and he's eating before they throw the blood, and he's eating chutz lachoma, not even in the courtyard. He's eating it outside of the wall of Jerusalem. The Rabbi Shimon lokeh chamesh. The guy gets 5 times lashes. Why? As we just said, because zar, he's a non-kohen. He ate from olah, 2. Fozrika, 3. And chutz lachoma, outside the wall. Why is that 4, 5? I'd imagine 4 and 5 are because he ate it not only outside of the temple, he also ate it outside of Yerushalayim. So he's supposed to eat it. So he broke 2 things with eating it outside of Jerusalem. Not eating it outside of the courtyard, and also out of Yerushalayim. Yeah?
If no one's allowed to eat the olah, and he's a non-kohen, isn't it a double whammy? And why isn't it like double punishment for no reason?
What do you mean?
It wasn't allowed, no one's allowed to eat the olah.
Correct. But here the point is, we're trying to find scenarios where you would see that the person would have the maximum amount of malkut. Like we found in a scenario where a person eats a certain kind of bug. He was, 3 Yisurim, 5 Yisurim, 7 Yisurim, 6, whatever. Okay. Says the Gemara, so therefore, you just told me that Rabbi Shimon makes it asur, but not lashes worthy. You see, Rava said that you did 5 malkut. The Gemara says, no, chamisha isurin havu. What he meant was 5 type of malkut penalties, but not that he actually gets the malkut, because as we said, you would not be able to give malkut based on a kal vachomer. Didn't we say Elohen Alokin? These are the people that get malkut. So the Mishnah actually means specifically malkut. But according to Rabbi Shimon, right, some of the things that we mentioned in the Mishnah are actually in the Braita come from a kal vachomer. So how would we be able to give the guy malkut if the kal vachomer comes? If the malkut comes from a kal vachomer, from that which we learned, and not from something which is expressly stated, Ela, says the Gemara, krayeterahu. Rabbi Shimon explains not that there's a kal vachomer, but rather that there's an extra pasuk. And since you have an extra pasuk, what does that mean? That the extra pasuk is telling you that. That's a explicit form of warning, and therefore you'd be able to give the guy lashes. It's not like a kal vachomer. The Gemara says michdi. What does this mean? Michdi. Let's see. What does this mean? Ve'hevetim shama. Let's see the pasuk. The pasuk says, you see number 1 in the inside column of Yudchet Amud Aleph. Ve'hevetim shama. You see that on the corner? Aleph. Vehevetem shama, and you will bring over there olotechem, your olas, vezivchechem, and your korbanot, vet maasrotechem, and your maaser, vet terumat yedchem, and the terumah of your hand, which we said means bikurim, v'nidrotechem, v'nidvotechem, u'bechorot bekachem v'tzonchem. So that pasuk is not the same as the one that we read earlier on 17a. Okay, 17a. The pasuk was in Devarim 12:17. This pasuk is Devarim 12:7. So what are you seeing over here? You're seeing almost an identical pasuk that mentions all of the things that we said in the pasuk in pasuk 12 and 7. So you see that it went over each one of those things. By mentioning the same thing, again, each of those things, I now have an extra pasuk telling me this logic. So even though before Rabbi Shimon expressed it as a kal vachomer, the Gemara says, maybe you understand what Rabbi Shimon is telling you instead is an extra pasuk. And then we have a pasuk that tells you this concept by being extra, that it's obligated in the Torah. Let it say you can't eat them. Right? Mehadar mefaresh bahu rachmana lamali. Why did you need to go through them all again? So the extra pasuk came along to give you a prohibition when it comes to each one of these korbanot as Rabbi Shimon expressed them. Okay. Gufa. Now the Gemara goes back to where we were before. Amar Rava said, Zasha achal min ha'olah lefnei zikah chutz l'choma, Rabbi Shimon lo kechamesh. You had a guy who was a non-Kohen, who ate from ha'olah outside, before the zirika, outside the walls of not only the temple, but outside Jerusalem. He gets 5 times Malkut. Gemara says, 5 is not enough. The poor guy. I just hope he did not learn Masechet Makkot. Like, imagine he does this like by mistake, and then all of a sudden he's reading it. He's like, oh no, right? And if he did it by mistake, he wouldn't get lashes. V'lil kinami, says the Gemara, let him also get Malkut, because it says Mishum, v'zar lo yochal ki kodeshem. And a non-Kohen is not allowed to eat from the korbanot, ki kodeshem, because they are holy. It's kodshei kodashim. So since the pasuk describes Kodesh Kodashim, the highest form of holy korbanot, as being something that a non-Kohen is prohibited from eating from, so there's a general rule that would also obligate him from Malkut. The Gemara says, that's talking about, that pasuk is talking about when you have a korban that the Kohanim are allowed to eat. And then a non-Kohen eats from it, he gets the isur of eating the portion of the Kohen. But over here by Olah, is there a portion for the Kohen? No. So therefore, there's no additional isur from this pasuk. Over here, where the Kohanim also don't get to eat from it, this isur on the Israel does not extend. It's the Gemara, why 5 again? The pasuk says that you're not allowed to eat meat in the field that's terefa, that is non-kosher. Okay? Once the basar, the food, leaves the place where it's supposed to be. So, as we said, all kodshei kodashim, the holy of holy korbanot, which includes olah, which includes chatat, they're not allowed to be taken out of the temple grounds. Okay, they're too holy, they're not allowed to be taken out. What happens when you take it out? Immediately, the meat becomes asur to eat. It's the Gemara. Right? Immediately, what does that then become? It becomes taref. You're not allowed to eat it. So if that's the case, ask the Gemara, so why don't I get Malkut for that? Now, I just want to point out Rashi. You see Rashi over here? Kivan shiatza, 3 lines from the bottom of Rashi. Kivan shiatza basar chutz michitzato ne'asar. Once the meat of something which is kodshei kodashim leaves the place it's supposed to be eaten, it becomes forbidden. Mi basadeh yetera kadaik, kasadeh she'en bo mechitzot. The pasuk says that meat that was bisadeh terefa. Take a look at. It doesn't bring it over here. Take a look at. Let me see if they bring it in the notes.
Back in and the Kohen eats it and therefore it becomes kosher again?
No. Once it left, it can't come back in. It's asur.
Is he allowed to give it to his
Sorry?
Is he allowed to give it to his family if they come inside the area? Is some part? Is he allowed to give it to his family?
Generally, what's allowed for a Kohen is allowed for the family. But obviously, there's certain laws that of purity that they need to be maintaining. But if they are, then yes. Okay. Kivan shiatza basar chutz lemichitzato ne'esar mibasadeh yitera kadayik. It's bringing it from the extra mibasadeh, kesadeh. That the same way like a sadeh, a field, doesn't have walls, correct? A field is open. En bo mechitzot. V'lamadnu mikan, we learn from here, koche kodashim, any holy of holies, chutz lekilayim, outside of the walls, ve'over sheotzi et yado b'shat shchitat imo, or ubar, a baby that sticks its hand out during the time that the mother is being slaughtered. So let's say you have the time where they're doing the shechita to make a cow kosher. Imagine during the process of shechita, this is just an interesting law, by the way. If you do shechita on a cow, and they find afterwards in the cow there's a foal, I think they would call it, right?
A mum?
No, a child. It was a foal, right? So the halacha is: do you need to do another shechita on the baby, on the lamb? You don't, because until it leaves, it's part of the mother. And I did shechita on the mother, so now this is also does not need shechita. Okay. Now it gets very interesting. What happens if they did shechita, and after they did shechita, the animal comes out alive? Happens. That would not need shechita. No.
Wow.
Why? It's alive.
In fact, where do we have this? Extra points. Fascinating. Chazal tell us that we know that Yosef went to his father, and he said to his father, he complained about his brothers. And he said, they're not doing this right, they're not doing that right. One of the things he told his father is that they're eating meat without shechita. They're eating evem and achai, limbs off of a live animal without doing shechita. Why? Because he saw them eat from the animal that had done shechita on the mother. He didn't know that they had already done shechita, so he thought that they were just eating it without shechita. So he told his father, look, they're eating taref, it's not NK. He didn't know what really happened. So was a real-time example of this halakha. Okay? That's one of the reasons why they hated him, because he misinterpreted what they had done in a negative way without knowing.
I thought the sacrifice had to be older than 3 years old.
We're not talking about a sacrifice here. Good point. We're not talking about sacrifice.
So that they ensure that it's not
Yes.
a baby, right?
Yeah, but this is not a sacrifice. We're just saying that one of the things we learn from Basar Sadeh Terefa, that it says Sadeh is Eno Mechitzot. This is one of the things that we learn from. Two of the things that we're learning from here. Number one, that a korban outside of its walls is like a Sadeh Terefa, and also this ubar, the baby that sticks its hand out during shechita. Now it's not part of the mother anymore. Okay, so now you would have to do shechita on the foal as well. Okay, says the Gemara, "Shiatza basar chutz mechitzato ne'esar." So therefore, I should get malkut as well for this new isur of eating something that's taref out of its just like the taref of the sadeh. The Gemara answers, "Hani milihecha de bifnim chazi." Again, the only time we're making an isur for leaving the place where you're supposed to eat it is when you're supposed to eat it. If you're not supposed to eat it, then there's no isur. This isur doesn't apply. Okay. Gemara says, "V'lilki nami k'Rabbi Eliezer." Why did you say 5? It should get a malkut according to Rabbi Eliezer. What's Rabbi Eliezer? Damar Rabbi Eliezer, lo yochal ki kodeshu. Rabbi Eliezer says that when it comes to the food of a korban, which is notar, which goes back to what you said earlier. Let's say something goes past the time that you're supposed to eat it. So each korban has a certain amount of time that you're allowed to eat it in. Some gets 2 days and 1 night. Some get 1 day and 1 night. Korban Pesach is only that night. Okay, so there's a time limit to when you eat the korban. Says the Gemara, when let's say a person eats it after its time, the pasuk says lo yochal ki kadesh, because it's holy. Ki kodeshu. Kol shebekodesh pasul, anything which is pasul when it's kodesh, anything which is disqualified when it's holy, the Torah is coming to tell you that if you ate something that you were not allowed to eat, that was holy, you get malkut, you get lashes. So therefore, let's assume and understand that a korban that left its place is the same as a korban that left its time. And therefore I should get lashes. So if Rabbi Eliezer says that if you eat a korban after its expiration date, you get lashes, so over here in this case, that he ate the korban olah outside of the walls of Jerusalem, he should get lashes. The Gemara says, "Hani mili hecha dekodem pisu lechazi." That's only true when before the time expires, you had a time to be able to do it. Olah, there was never a time or never a place where you were able to eat it. So therefore, you can't say that taking it out of its place falls under the lashes of Rabbi Eliezer. The Gemara continues and asks more against Rava. Why do you say 5? Let's give him Malkut a 6th time because of the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. The Tanya, Rabbi Eliezer says, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Kol Shu Kalil Tiyeh, anything that has the commandment in the Torah that it gets completely burned on the Mizbech, i.e. in Olah, Liten lo taseh lechilato, that it comes to give you a commandment, an isur, against eating from it. So since we know Olah has that hayuv of Kalil, so we should have another Malkut for this pasuk. The Gemara says, Enachenami. You're right. There should be a 6th one on this case of Rava, which is a Zar, a non-Kohen, eats an Olah before Zerikah outside of Jerusalem, outside of the walls of Jerusalem. He said 5. The Gemara says you should really have 6. Rava, Rava, who holds that you only get 5, he says that that it's true. It's true that this, we would have to agree that this would give you a 6th version of Makkot. But, thank you so much. Amen. But Rava would agree with you that it might be that there are other Isurim out there in the Torah that he didn't think of. He was just referring to the psukim that Rav Shimon was talking about. How many would that give you? So within the Braita, Rabbi Shimon, you would have that. By the way, I was just thinking to myself, why don't we just change the case? Because a lot of these extra malkut, which are not relevant, each time because we say that there was never a time when you could eat the olah, no kohen was ever supposed to eat the olah. Fine, no problem. Just change the case to a chatat. A chatat, which has to be eaten inside the kilayim, right? Inside the walls of the temple courtyard, that was eaten by a non-kohen before Zerikah, right? Outside of the walls. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, what do we got here? The kohen, right? The non-kohen is 1. Eating it before Zerikah is a 2nd. Eating it outside the walls of Jerusalem is a 3rd. But we have all of these other malkuts that the Gemara tried to institute, and each time failed because there was never a starting point to eating that korban. So Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon, the other derasha, Rabbi Shimon, each one of these would have been, so you might wind up, if you did this case in a korban hatat, you might wind up with even more malkut. Okay, says the Gemara, let's continue. Amar Rav Gidel, Rav Gidel said in the name of Rav, Kohen she'achal mechatat, siman kuza. Kohen she'achal mechatat ve'asham lefnei zrika. Let's say I have a Kohen. He ate from chatat, a sin offering, or asham, which is a guilt offering. He ate from one of these before the zrika. Okay, the Kohen gets lashes. My ta'ama, what's the reason? Ta'amar kara ve'achlu otam asher kupar bahem. You're allowed to eat them asher kupar bahem once they had kapara. When does kapara come? When you do the zerikah. Le'acha kapara in. You're allowed to eat from it after the kapara comes. Lefnei kapara, but before the kapara is administered, lo, you're not allowed to. Says the Gemara, lav haba michlal aseh lavu. When you have a lav, a negative commandment, which comes out of a positive commandment, lavu, it is considered to be a lav. Okay? What does that mean? The Torah says, eat from it after kapara. What are we learning from that? Don't eat from it for kapara. But does the Torah say that? No. It says positive commandment. Eat from it after kapara. What are we saying? That means don't eat from it before kapara. That's a lav, haba, a negative commandment that comes michlal aseh, from a positive commandment. Okay. The Gemara says, Mativ Rava, Rava S. Rava, by the way, is on fire. This whole page is all Rava. He's rocking and rolling. Mativ Rava, 6 for 6. The guy hit the cycle, 2 grand slams. Mativ Rava, Rava asks, V'chol behema mafreset parsa v'shosa chesa shete perasot ma'ale gera ba'behema ota tochelu. Now, this pasuk is the pasuk that tells us what you need in order to be able to have a kosher animal. So what are the 2 signs of a kosher animal? The animal needs to chew its cud, okay? And the animal needs to have split hooves, okay? Those are the 2 things. Now, those animals you're allowed to eat. The Gemara says, that one you can eat. That's a positive statement, right? What does that tell you? Ota tochelu, that you can eat. And you cannot eat any other animals. If we read the Torah the way you just told us to read the Torah, like when you said, and the Kohen eats from it after the kapara. That tells you that the Kohen, that he cannot eat before. If every time it says you should do this, it means that we're going to learn out, you're not allowed to do the opposite of that. Why do I need the pasuk to then go on and tell me you should not eat the flip side of this? Just by telling me you should eat it when it has these 2 signs, I already know that if you don't have those 2 signs, then you shouldn't eat it. The same way we made the dirasha by the Kohen eating from before Zerika. Question.
How do you differentiate when it says animal with split hooves and chews its cud, right? To a, let's say, a chicken, which is also an animal, but doesn't have...
So the Torah divides birds from animals. And then it gives different signs for animals, different signs for fish. Okay? So each category has its own rules. So in the world of animals, those are the 2 signs. If you found an animal that had those 2 signs, you'd technically be allowed to eat it, even though you may have never in your life heard that anyone eats this, or there's no kosher restaurant or butcher that carries it. You'd technically be allowed to eat it. The Chazon Ish actually should just know, the Chazon Ish introduced a very interesting stringency. He said that any animal that we don't have a tradition to eat, you're not allowed to eat it.
That's what the buffalo.
Yes, excellent. Seibu is what he's talking about. There was a tremendous source of meat called the seibu. Okay, it's this huge animal. It's kind of a little bit like a buffalo. Okay, so it's a lot of meat. It's got the 2 signs, but it wasn't an animal that ever existed in the Jewish realm of food. Okay, we didn't.
Maybe that's just because we weren't in the population.
That's exactly the point. Okay. So, just judging by the pasuk, you would say, what do you mean? It's got the signs. Yeah. The Chazon Ish introduced this new stringency to say, listen, if we don't have a tradition to eat it, then we don't eat it. Okay? And there's multiple things like this. Yeah. Technically, a giraffe is kosher.
But the giraffe, they don't know where to cut.
What?
He one time had a sweater with things.
Yeah, that's a very famous story. It's a very famance story. Now, is everyone bound? Yes, they did. That was a really funny story, actually. You were at the Suda?
I didn't go to the Suda.
You don't eat meat.
I knew when we first happened.
So, let me tell you what she means. There's a so as an example, are you allowed to eat giraffe?
Yes.
Giraffe chews its cud, has split hooves.
It's kosher, but they don't know where to cut.
So that is a fallacy. Everyone says, "Oh, we don't know where to cut it." It's not true. We do know where to cut it.
So
Everyone thinks that. It's just not true. You cut it. You cut it on a place on the neck where you have access to the two pipes.
Climb the tree.
Yeah. So any place, there's no specific place. Any place that you would be able to have access to both of those would be okay. All right. Now maybe it's not practical to eat giraffe, but it's allowed. So they did a seudah, a meal where they found all of the questionable things. They served grasshopper and cebu and this and that. Yeah. So there was a few people involved in this. I think it was initiated by a rabbi called Slifkin, Natan Slifkin, who was the zoologist. Okay. So at the time they made this whole meal, and everything on the table was those things that like no one had ever eaten. Deer and bison and whatever else you can imagine that people have. Pheasant, pigeon. By the way, someone just told me recently that there's a place in the city you could eat pigeon.
Slav.
I don't know why anyone would want to eat pigeon. Right? But either way, you could eat so they ate all the different animals. And people were saying at the time, well, the Chazon Ish says that, we don't have a tradition on this or on that, My father-in-law told me he remembers in Morocco, they used to eat grasshoppers. Wow. Now, you couldn't eat all of them because the Torah says there's a certain kind that you're allowed to eat. And I asked my father-in-law, how would you know which grasshoppers yes, which not? And he said there's a way to be able to tell. You count the legs, number one. And number two, he said, on the back of the grasshopper, there's like a sign. It looks like the letter Chet. He says he remembers as a child. All the rabbis, they would eat it. High source of protein. Right? He told me very crunchy. I don't know.
You don't have to dice it.
I don't know, yeah, exactly. Instead of fried onions, I don't know, either way. Let me finish this 1 second. So at the time people were like, you're doing this, the Chazon Ish, you can't eat from it. He says, look, we don't have to, I'm not following the Chazon Ish's opinion on this. The law is that you're allowed to eat it. He made a stringency that we only eat things that we have a Kabbalah for, but that's a stringency.
He had a zoo trip, I went.
And in the end, and the people that ate at that Seudah all got food poisoning. So people took that as some sort of a divine sign. Yes.
No, it's irrelevant. I was just thinking, why this one grasshopper out of all the insects is kosher? Like why?
It's a good question. I know. Yeah, you'd have to ask the one above. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no,
but it's not only one. It's like there's like gazillion species of grasshoppers. Yeah, chocolate covered.
So we have this law for fish. We also have this law for animals. Do we have this law for birds? Is there a law for birds?
No, it's not simanim for birds. So as an example, with animals, there's a sign, like these two conditions. With fish, there's a sign.
Yes.
With birds, the Torah mentions
specific
the ones that you can't. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that you cannot.
It goes through. Yeah.
that you can or cannot.
That you cannot.
We can't have birds of prey.
You can't have any birds of prey, yeah? So a hawk, a vulture, an owl. But it says it in the Torah, which ones they are. Ve'et ha'yanshuf, ve'et ha'tinshamet, right? It goes through all the, So, okay. So, says the Gemara.
Rabbi, I have a quick question.
Sure.
If it did say which birds we can eat, can we deduce that the birds that it wasn't mentioned we cannot eat?
No, we can eat.
Let's say the
Yes.
dog. Yes, okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let's continue. So the Gemara is asking. So if this is a correct dirasha that that a kohen that eats before zrika gets lashes, and the reason is because it says in the Torah, eat after kapara, and from that we learned don't eat before kapara, and that's why he gets lashes. So when it comes to kosher, and it says you should eat from an animal that has these two signs, why did the Torah find it necessary to then say, and if it doesn't have it, don't eat from it? I would have known that by myself the same way you do by a Kohen, that it says eat after kapara, and we learn don't eat before kapara. I would have been able to learn myself don't eat without the two simanim. Gemara says, okay, so now let's go back to Rav Gidal Amarav and reinterpret it. Ela'i itmar, if you want to say, Rav Gidal Barav explained, you have to say Hachi Itmar. Amarav Gidal Amarav Gidal said the name of Rav, Zar she'achal mechatat ve'asham lefnei zrika, a non-Kohen that ate from a chatat and asham before zrika, patur. He does not get malkut. Even though we know that a non-Kohen is not allowed to eat from Kodesh Kodashim. My ta'ama, what's the reason? Ta'amar kira, because the pasuk says, V'achlu otam asher kupar bahem, you shall eat from them, from the ones that you, before, after kapara. What do you learn from there? You learn, asher kupar bahem, the ones that got kapara from them. They're the ones that should get kapara. But a person who did not get kapara from them should not get kapara. Kol hecha de karinan be. Anytime you read v'achalu otam asher kupar bahem, that you could say anytime that you could apply those that eat, the ones that eat it are the ones that do the kapara, like the kohanim. Karinan be, you read v'zar lo yochal ki kodeshem. You attach to that also that a non-kohen lo yochal cannot eat ki kodeshem. Okay? And anytime that you cannot say that the Kohanim who receive atonement can eat from those things, lo karinan be v'zar lo yochal. You cannot put on a zar lo yochal. So therefore, before the blood is given, before the blood is spread, you cannot express it, you cannot learn this halakha because we don't have both of those conditions met. Okay, we're gonna end over here and we'll pick up Be'ezat Hashem on Tuesday evening. Be'ezat Hashem. Just to be clear, we are on Tuesday unless otherwise expressly over.